Elias Reed carried everything he owned in one flour sack, and the gate of his own family's ranch swung shut behind him. The bolt slid home. On the far side, his brother Garrett watched from the porch and did not come down. This is Prairie Hearth Stories, where the smallest creatures carry the largest truths. Elias did not look back at the house. He had built half of it with his own hands. Behind him, low to the ground, an old dog slipped under the gate rail and fell into step at his heel. It was his father's dog. Nobody had told the dog he was supposed to stay. Their father, Silas Reed, had died on a Tuesday in the fall. Elias had nursed him for 2 years. He had spooned broth, changed linens, sat up through the coughing nights. Garrett had come home 3 weeks before the end. He came home smiling, with a lawyer's card in his pocket. The will was read the morning after the funeral. The flowers on the grave had not yet wilted. Garrett stood in the front room and read it out himself. Everything to the elder son, the house, the land, the cattle, the creek bottom, every acre. To Elias, one line, my son Elias, who will understand. Elias did not understand. Not then. Pa wasn't in his right mind at the end, Garrett said. You know that. You were here. This is the will that counts. He held up the paper. It was dated 2 years back, before the sickness. It's all legal, brother. Signed and witnessed. Nothing to argue. I'm not arguing, Elias said. Good, then you'll be gone by sundown. Garrett said it like a man scheduling a delivery. Vera wants to air out your room. That was the cruelest thing anyone did. Not a blow. A sentence about airing out a room. Elias had been born in that room. The front room was full of people. Neighbors. 2 of the hands. The preacher who had buried Silas the day before. They had come to pay respects, and they stayed to watch a man turned out of his home. Not one of them spoke. Vera stood by the window with her arms folded and a small, satisfied set to her mouth. It's for the best, she said, to no one in particular. A house can't have 2 masters. Somebody coughed. Somebody studied the floorboards. That is how it is done, when it is done in daylight, quietly, and with witnesses who will not meet your eye. Odessa was in the doorway. She had cooked for the Reeds 30 years. She had raised both boys with a wooden spoon and a soft heart. She opened her mouth to speak, and Garrett looked at her, and she closed it again. Later she would hate herself for that. Right then, she only looked at the floor. Garrett crossed the room. He took the pocket watch from Elias's vest, their father's watch, brass and worn smooth. This stays with the estate, he said, and slipped it into his own pocket. Elias let him. He said nothing. He had learned, in 2 years of sick rooms, that some griefs are too big to fit through the mouth. He packed the flour sack that afternoon. A shirt, a razor, a photograph. He walked out at sundown, like he'd been told. Garrett did not see him off. Vera watched from the porch to be sure he went. There was one place left. The old home place. Across the creek, past the live oaks, sat the first cabin Silas Reed ever built. A dog trot of cedar logs, 2 rooms with a breezeway between. Silas and his young wife had lived there before the big house, before the money, before the boys. Nobody had lived in it for 30 years. The roof sagged. The chimney leaned, but it stood on a corner of land too rocky to graze, and no one would think to send a man off it. Elias walked there in the last light. The dog walked with him. The creek ran low and clear over the limestone. The live oaks held the dark early. When he pushed open the cabin door, the smell of dust and cedar and old wood smoke came out to meet him. A pack rat had built in the hearth. Wasps had built in the eaves. A single ladder-back chair sat in the middle of the floor, as if someone had left it mid-conversation. He set down the flour sack. He looked at the ruin of the place, and for the first time all day, something in his chest gave way. Not tears, just a long breath he hadn't known he was holding. The dog went straight to the far corner of the room. He sniffed the floorboards. He turned 3 times and lay down there, nose to the wood, and would not be called off. "Come here, Duke," Elias said. "There's nothing over there." Duke thumped his tail once and stayed. What Elias did not know was that the dog was right, and he was wrong, and that everything he had been robbed of lay 3 feet under the boards, where the old dog had chosen to lie. He did not know it. He only knew he was tired. He was building a small fire in the swept hearth when he heard footsteps. Odessa came across the breezeway with a covered basket. She had walked 1.5 miles in the dark. "I couldn't send you off with nothing," she said. She set the basket down. Cornbread, a jar of beans, a wedge of cheese, a candle. Your daddy, God rest him, would rise up out of the ground. "You'll get in trouble," Elias said. "Let me," she said. She looked around the cabin. Her eyes stopped on the dog in the corner. She frowned. Then she said something strange. "That's where Duke slept the last week your daddy was alive. Right there. Silas would send him to it. Nobody knew why." She shook her head. "Old dogs and their notions. What do you mean he'd send him? Just what I said." Odessa pulled her shawl close. "That last week your daddy couldn't hardly lift his head, but he'd point at Duke, and point at that corner, and the dog would go lie on it. Silas would watch him do it and close his eyes, satisfied, like a thing had been settled." "You should have told me," he said. "Told you what? That a sick old man liked to watch his dog sleep?" She almost smiled. "No, child. Some things you don't understand until you're standing right in the middle of them." She left before he could ask more. Elias ate the cornbread by the candle. Then he lay down on the cabin floor with the flour sack for a pillow, and the old dog came and pressed his warm back against him, and both of them slept. The days made a shape. Elias woke at first light. He built the fire. He boiled coffee in a pot Odessa had smuggled out. Duke went to the door and waited, every morning the same. Man and dog, and the cold hearth going warm. He worked on the cabin, because a man has to work on something. He patched the roof with cedar shakes he split himself. He swept out the pack rat. He scrubbed 30 years of dust from the one window. And every day, 3 or 4 times, the old dog went back to the far corner and lay on the same board and would not be moved. "You're a stubborn old fool," Elias told him. Duke wagged his tail. Elias found things as he cleaned. In a chink in the logs, a child's marble. Under a loose stone in the hearth, a rusted spur. And on a peg behind the door, where it had hung untouched, his father's first hat, an old felt hat, sweat-stained, the brim curled. Silas must have hung it there as a young man and forgotten it. Elias took it down. He held it a long time. Then he set it on the mantel, and Duke came and lay beneath it, nose up, breathing in whatever a dog breathes in. The evenings were the hardest and the best. Elias would sit in the doorway with the coffee going cold and watch the light leave the live oaks. Duke would lie with his chin on Elias's boot. Sometimes Elias talked to him. A man alone talks to a dog, or he talks to himself, and the dog is the better company. "Pa built this whole place from that chair out," he said one evening. "And they read me out of it in 4 minutes." Duke sighed the way old dogs sigh. "You don't care, do you? Long as there's a fire and a boot to lie on." There wasn't always a fire. Twice that first month the wood ran low, and Elias went to bed cold rather than cut on land that wasn't his. But the mornings came anyway. He built the fire when he had it. boiled the coffee. The dog went to the door and waited. And slowly the ruin of a cabin began to feel like the one thing in the world that belonged to him, even though, on paper, it didn't. Odessa came when she could, at dusk, twice a week, with what she could carry. Eggs, a twist of coffee. Once, a whole cooked hen. "Miss Odessa, you'll lose your place. Then I'll lose it," she said. She sat in the one ladder-back chair and caught her breath. "This chair," she said, running her hand along the arm. "Silas made this chair. First thing he ever built on this land. Before the house, before Garrett, before you." She smiled. Proud as a rooster of this chair he was. Elias looked at it new. A plain chair, his father's hands in every joint. Word of him got around, the way word does. A neighbor named Mrs. Tate sent her boy across the creek with a sack of seed potatoes and a note that said only, "Plant these," from a friend. The blacksmith in town resold his one pair of boots and would not take a coin for it. Nobody said much. But a cast-out man learns to read the small things. A sack of potatoes is a whole sentence if you know how to hear it. There came an evening he could not hold it. He was mending the door in the last light. And it all came at once. His father's face. The 2 years of nights. The gate swinging shut. The watch slipped into Garrett's pocket. His hand stopped on the wood. He put his forehead against the doorframe and stood like that. Not weeping. Just leaning, as if the door alone held him up. Duke pressed against his leg. Elias put his hand down and found the dog's head. "It's all right," he told the dog, though it wasn't. "It's all right." After a while it was a little more all right. He went back to the door. The trouble came on a Sunday. A rider came to the creek and did not cross it. It was Cole, one of Garrett's hands, a decent enough man. "Mr. Garrett says tell you," Cole called across the water. He looked ashamed to say it. "The home place is being sold. Land agents coming from Austin, month's end. Says you got till then. Says don't get comfortable." "You tell him I heard you," Elias said. Cole nodded. He didn't leave right off. "For what it's worth," he said, "the men don't like how it went. Your daddy was good to us. That didn't sit right with a one of us." Then he turned his horse and rode back. Elias stood by the creek a long while, selling the home place. The one corner of the world he had left. He looked back at the cabin, at the smoke from his own fire, at the old dog in the doorway, waiting for him. And something in him decided he would not run from this place, whatever came. Not this one. Not again. But that night, Elias Reed would open a thing that had waited 2 years in the dark for him to come home, and nothing after would be the same. It started with the dog. It always started with the dog. A storm came through, and the thunder shook something loose in old Duke. He would not settle. He went to the corner and scratched at the board. He scratched and whined and scratched. Elias got up to quiet him. He knelt by the dog in the candlelight, and this time, instead of pulling him away, he looked at the board. There was a seam. A cut in the wood filled with dust, squared off too neat to be an accident. Someone had lifted this board before. Someone had cut it to lift. Elias got his knife. He worked the board up. Under it was dirt, and set down in the dirt was a box. A cedar box, the size of a Bible, the lid carved with a running horse. His father had carved that horse. Elias knew the hand the way he knew the chair. He lifted it out. Duke stopped whining. Duke sat and watched and was still. Inside the box was a folded paper and a letter and an older watch, the grandfather's. The folded paper was a will. It was dated 8 months back, the spring of the year Silas died. not 2 years. 8 months. Witnessed by Odessa Fay and by Silas's own physician, and stamped by a notary in the county seat, a Mr. Pettigrew, it left the whole of the Reed ranch, house, land, cattle, and the creek bottom with its spring to Elias Reed, who stayed. Garrett's will was the old one. This one came after. This one was the truth. The letter was in his father's shaking late hand. "Son," it began, "if Garrett has done what I fear he will do, then he has shown you at last who he is, and shown himself to the Lord besides. I could not stop him with my breath. So I stopped him with paper. I hid it where only a faithful thing would find it. Duke slept over it every night I had left. He'll take you there when it's time. Forgive me for making you wait. What is yours was always yours." Pa Elias sat on the cabin floor and read it 3 times. His hands shook. The storm walked off east, and a thing he had not felt in 2 years crept into him, small and warm and dangerous. Hope, he read the one line again, to Elias Reed, who stayed. 2 words his father had chosen with a shaking hand, who stayed. All that time, Elias had thought the old man never noticed. The broth, the linens, the long nights. He'd thought Silas took it the way a man takes the sun coming up, without thanks, because it always did. But Silas had noticed. Silas had noticed everything, and he had set it all down in cedar and dirt and left a dog to keep it. Elias put his face in his hands. Then he laughed once, a cracked sound, because there was nothing else big enough to do. He did not wait for morning. At first light he walked the 6 miles to town, with the box under his arm and the dog at his heel, and he laid it all on the desk of Mr. Pettigrew, the notary, who put on his spectacles and went pale and then red. "I notarized this myself," Pettigrew said. 8 months ago. Silas swore me to keep quiet till it surfaced." He looked up. "Son, this is the true will. The one they read is void the day this one is entered. Do you understand what you're holding?" "I'm starting to," Elias said. Pettigrew took off his spectacles and polished them on his sleeve, which is what a careful man does when his hands need something to do. "It means the ranch is yours, son, every acre, down to the creek. And it means your brother has a great deal of explaining to do about a will he had every reason to know was dead." He put the spectacles back on. "I'd get this entered today, before anyone gets a notion to lose it. By noon it was known in town. By dusk it was known at the big house. Word travels. Someone told Garrett that his brother had walked into the county seat with a cedar box and their father's dog. And out at the ranch, Garrett Reed stood on his stolen porch and felt, for the first time, the ground move under his boots. Garrett came to the cabin the next morning. He came on his good horse, with Vera beside him, and 2 of the hands behind, not to fight, but for witnesses. The way a man brings witnesses when he means to bully. Elias was on the porch. Duke stood up. "This is a forgery," Garrett said. "He didn't get down. Some scheme you and that old cook cooked up. Pa left me everything. The whole county heard it read. The whole county heard the old will," Elias said. "This one came after. You forged it. Mr. Pettigrew notarized it. Odessa witnessed it. Doc Harlan witnessed it. You want to call all 3 of them liars, Garrett? You go ahead and do it out loud, in town where they can hear you." Garrett's mouth worked. He looked at the hands behind him. They looked at their saddle horns. Not one would meet his eye. Cole, the decent one, spoke up quiet. "It's true, Mr. Garrett," he said. "Doc told us himself. Your daddy made a new will. You knew about the first one. Did you know about the second?" The question hung there. Garrett's silence answered it. Vera tried then. "This is absurd," she said. "Garrett, Are you going to stand there and let a hired cook and a stray dog be quiet, Vera? Garrett said it tired. He was already somewhere else. He was doing the arithmetic of a man who has just understood that every number he trusted was wrong. Then Odessa came out of the cabin. She had been there since dawn, cooking, because that is what she did. She was not afraid of Garrett anymore. She had done her being afraid. I stood in that room and watched your father sign it, she said. I put my own name under his. I held my tongue 8 months because he asked me to, and every one of those days I watched you play the master in a house that wasn't yours. She stepped down off the porch, a small gray woman, and Garrett a head taller, and it was Garrett who stepped back. God saw it, even when the rest of us held our tongues, she said. You put your own brother out the gate with a flour sack, the morning after we buried the man who made you. You took the watch off his chest. Shane doesn't wash off, Garrett Reed. You'll wear that one till you die. Nobody said anything. The creek ran. A jay called. Garrett looked at Elias. For 1 second something moved in his face. The boy he'd been, maybe, before the money got in. I could fight this, he said, but the voice had gone out of it. You could, Elias said. You'd lose, and every soul in the county would watch you lose. He came to the edge of the porch, Duke at his side. I'm not going to strip you of a thing Pa wanted you to have. There'd have been a fair share in that letter for a brother who'd earned it. But you didn't earn it. So here is what you get, Garrett. You get to hand back what isn't yours. And you get to leave the way you made me leave. He held out his hand. The watch. Garrett stood a long moment. Then he took their father's watch from his vest and put it in Elias's palm. Brass, worn smooth, warm from being carried. He said not a word. He looked once at the cabin, at the sagging roof, at the ladder-back chair on the porch their father had made with his own hands. And whatever he saw there, he kept it to himself. Then he got on his horse. Vera was already crying, or acting it. They rode back toward the big house they would be leaving, and the hands fell in behind, and one by one, as they passed the porch. The men touched their hats to Elias Reed. Elias sat down in his father's ladder-back chair. He let the breath go out of him. Duke put his head on his knee. The watch ticked in his hand, still going after everything. By the next spring, the Reed Ranch was Elias's in law and in fact, and the home place had become a home again. He had not torn the old cabin down. He had done the opposite. He mended it, room by room, and moved into it, because the big house held too much of Garrett's stolen months and not enough of anything he loved. He ran the cattle from the little cabin his father built as a young man. He set the ladder-back chair on the porch. He hung the old felt hat on its peg behind the door, where it had waited 30 years. The creek ran full that spring. The live oaks leafed out green over the roof. In the evenings, the smell of cornbread came across the breezeway, because Elias had asked Odessa to come and keep his house, and to sit at his table, not behind it. She sat at the head of it most nights now, and told the young men who worked the ranch stories about a chair and a rooster-proud boy named Silas. The ranch did better under Elias than it ever had, not because he was cleverer than his brother, because the men worked for someone they would have chosen to work for, and that is a difference you can count at market. He never did move back into the big house. He rented it to a young family with 3 loud children and liked to hear them carrying across the water in the evenings. And on the porch, in the last gold of the day, an old dog slept beneath a hat that smelled of a man he had loved, having done the last and best work of his life. Odessa found Elias out there one evening, the watch in his hand, watching the light go. He'd be proud, she said. He left it all in a box, Elias said, under a dog. He trusted a dog to do what people wouldn't. He trusted the faithful thing, Odysseus said. That's all your daddy ever did. He just always knew where to look for it. Sometimes what a man is truly owed does not come from the ones who share his blood, but from the ones who never once left his side. A brother can sign the papers. Only a faithful heart keeps a truth safe in the dark until the day it is needed. That is the whole inheritance. Everything else is only land. Have you ever understood, too late, the love of someone who never learned to say it out loud, but who kept a place for you all along, and made sure that one day you would find it? Thank you for staying with this story to the very end. If it touched something in you, leave a comment and tell us what part of the country you are watching from. And subscribe to Prairie Hearth Stories so the next tale can find its way to you. Share it with someone who was pushed aside once and proven right in the end. They will understand why you sent it. Until the next story, hold close the faithful ones. They see more than we ever know. Elias looked down at the old dog asleep beneath his father's hat. He reached down and laid his hand on the gray head. "You always knew, didn't you, old man?" he whispered. And Duke, without opening his eyes, thumped his tail once against the boards.